Howdy, partner. Lamont at large with my trusty chopstick microphone. Today we are in Tombstone, Arizona at the Boothill graveyard. We're going to check out some graves right here. Come with me. Now, this is probably the most famous grave by far out here. This is the grave that people come to visit and want to take pictures of. This is the result of the shootout of the OK Corral between Billy Clanton, the McClory brothers, which you see right here. And then, of course, you had the Earp brothers, Virgil and Wyatt Earp. You had Doc Holliday, who they made some type of temporary law enforcement officer along with special policeman Morgan. And, of course, that fight was in the movie Tombstone with Kurt Russell. Again, the most famous shootout in the Wild Wild West history. Fun fact about that shootout, it only lasted 30 seconds. Everyone was wounded and or killed. Now, back in those days, you had a rather large disdain for law enforcement. You got to imagine back in those days in the 1870s, the 1880s, you're a guy, you're just working, you're a minor, you drink too much, you get into fights. There's really no law enforcement. It wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really made yet. And then all of a sudden the government makes these guys police officers or marshals, and they come into a town that people don't even really know what a police officer is or what they're supposed to do. And all of a sudden you have a guy in your area who says, hey, you can't do that. Prostitution is illegal. You can't do that. And you're like, what? A very big disrespect for law enforcement. And that's why you had a lot of times outlaws were looked upon as heroes and the police were looked upon as villains. You know, if you can kind of see the way things are going in our country right now, things kind of haven't changed in over 140 years. But anyways, yeah, one of the most famous Wild Wild West graves right here. The victims of, if you want to call them the victims, of the shooting at the OK Corral. And I find it funny how this is marked murdered in the streets of Tombstone. So usually when an officer kills a outlaw, you wouldn't really call it a murder. You'd call it a killing or justified shooting or what have you. But that just kind of goes to show you right there, people's lack of respect for law enforcement back in those days in particular. Now, you're going to see some of these graves here. Most of them do have the names. Also, however, a lot of them simply is stamped with the word unknown. Now, they're going to be stamped with the word unknown either because historical records were lost and we don't know who these people are, but however, it is more than likely that there is nobody in this grave anymore. This cemetery, Boothill Cemetery, it got its name because of back in those days, the amount of people that were killed and the violent ways in which they died. Oftentimes they would die with their boots on. You know, they would be drinking at the bar, walking around town, and everybody seemed to die with their boots on. And that's how it got its name. This cemetery closed for burials right at around 1900. And quite a number of people that were already buried here, their loved ones had their bodies exhumed and moved to a newer cemetery in town because they just did not want their loved ones to be buried in a cemetery that was so associated with lawlessness and just the criminal element. So you're going to see a lot of unknowns. Their bodies were simply moved to a new cemetery. But there's also quite a bit of information about the people buried here, how they died, and we're going to now proceed to visit each grave, or as many graves as I can do, and we'll talk about how they died. This is Rodriguez Patron. He was stabbed to death in 1882. Not much for records on exactly who he was. Maybe just a regular working guy. Kind of like me, kind of like you out there watching this video. This here is an unknown grave. Nobody knows the identity of this guy. Nobody knows his name, where he was from. anything of that kind. He was found at the bottom of a 60-foot mine shaft. Just a guy coming through town, and who knows what happened. The only fact about this guy was that he was very well dressed, which would, oftentimes when you see people getting killed in the streets out here, they're going to be, having dirty clothes, or they're just going to look rather unkempt. But the police remarked about how well dressed he was, and, no autopsies back in those days. So did this guy die from getting thrown? Did he get punched? Was he clubbed over the head? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Pat Byrne right here died of pneumonia, and he's buried next to another unknown grave. Oftentimes I always tell people we should be blessed to live in a day with modern medicine. This poor little girl was only 3 months old. Her name was Eva Waters. She died of scarlet fever. We got a couple more murder victims right here. This is Florentino. He was found dead with several bullets in him. Nobody knows what happened, or maybe nobody talks about it. Hey, I didn't see anything. Did you see anything? Nope, didn't see anything. Just minding my own business. Van Houten right here was beaten in the face with a stone until he died. Kind of tells you the caveman animalistic savagery that we would often find back in those days. He died over some form of a mining claim, which he did not record. Now, that tells me that possibly if somebody else might have owned the mine, leave a comment below. I'm thinking that maybe that somebody else owned the mine and he didn't claim something that he took from the mine. Who knows? Yeah, beat in the face with a stone. Not a very peaceful way to die, that is for sure. And this is Tom Waters right here. He is the father of the 3-month-old child, Eva Waters, that passed away from scarlet fever. And he was killed. Says he was killed over the color of his shirt. I didn't know there was a color thing back in those days, but nonetheless, a tragic way to die. This here is Chase Helm. He was shot and killed in 1982. He was shot by a man by the name of William McCauley. Two hot-tempered ranchers, I guess they could not seem to get along, and McCauley shot him because they both had a disagreement on the best way to drive cattle, fast or slow. Probably a couple of guys drinking, and so yeah. Frank Bowles right here seems to have his own little fenced off area. He died on August 26, 1980. He lived a little bit longer than the other people out here. He died when he was 2 weeks past turning 52 years of age. He was riding his horse, and it became frightened for some odd reason, and it threw him off. And his rifle hit the ground and accidentally shot himself in the knee with it. When his friends came to get him, they took him to camp to try to nurse him back to health. Of course, again, we don't really have medicine back in those days. I don't even think we have any medicine. If you have a headache, you're just going to have to tough it out. But I'm sure they figured out later on that coffee works well with a headache. And they were trying to take him to the doctor for the dreaded amputation. No anesthesia, guys. Back in those days, yep, when they're cutting your leg off, your arm off, you know what they do? They get you drunk, get you a big old plug of whiskey, and they would put like a bandana or some kind of cloth in your mouth to muffle your screams, and they would just start sawing at you. Like, that is how they did amputations back in the days. Be blessed to be born nowadays. But he didn't get a chance to go through with the amputation because he died of the infection as a result of that wound. This here is the Halderman Brothers. Simply says on their marker, hanged 1900. Now, there's no records of why they were hung. obviously they did something that somebody didn't like. Was the people that hung them, were they law enforcement or were they just other people? Who knows? Shows you how dangerous it was back in those days. Now this is Thos Gregory. There's no information on what happened to him. He died in 1882, and his small son, Junior, right here, 1882, he died of meningitis. And as we round this bend right here, we have Holo Lucero. Simply says that he was killed by Indians. What happened? Who knows? Everybody has a story at the end of the day. Unfortunately, our stories often, at times, are unable to be told. We got our first lady here. Ladies were not exempt from murder back in those days. This is Margarita. She was a dance hall girl, and she got into a fight with another girl. I believe they called the other girl Gold Dollar, and they were fighting over a man, and Gold Dollar stabbed and killed her. There's no historical records of what happened to Gold Dollar, if she was brought to justice or what have you. But back in those days, I guess justice was a subjective thing. This is William Claiborne right here. He was shot by Frank Leslie while drinking. He had a beef and wanted to settle what was wrong in his opinion. And that fight took place outside of the Oriental Saloon, and that's where Leslie worked. He was a bartender. Shot and killed him. Dick Toby. Dick Toby, what did you do? I have no idea. Dick Toby was shot by Sheriff Behan. Not sure what he did. Obviously, what he did was, in the sheriff's mind's eye, wrong. Verone Gray simply says that, well, he was by himself. Let's just say this. There's a dreaded word that I cannot say on YouTube because, of course, it's very bad. But let's just say that he was by himself and he took his own life. So, Verone Gray. Got some unknown graves right here. Could be just simply people that were once buried here, like I said earlier, or who knows. This here is Joseph Wetzel, killed in 1882. He died a unusual way. He got stoned to death by a bunch of Indians. Now, historical records and archives say that, well, Indians had guns too. Now, you know, when we first came and settled this country, they had the bows and arrows, and then they quickly adapted to technology and got themselves some guns as well. So they simply could have just shot him. So the reason why they stoned him to death and they didn't shoot him was because Joseph's friends were not too far away, and they didn't want to attract attention with the sound of their guns. So I guess the chief said, you know what, I think a stone would do the trick. And it most certainly did. Unfortunately for poor old Joseph Wetzel. We have several graves right here. Dan Dowd, Red Sample. We got Tex Howard, Bill Delaney, and Dan Kelly. These guys were robbers, and they were all legally hung on March 8th of 1884. What these guys did was they robbed a store in Bisbee, which is not too far from Tombstone. Now, back in those days, obviously you wanted to wear a mask to hide your identity, but these guys did not wear masks. They went to the store to rob the place, and it was said, according to eyewitnesses, when they left the store, anybody that looked at them they just shot you dead right there. They were shooting everybody. They were shooting old women, men, even a baby they shot at. I don't know if they hit the baby, I hope not. But these guys were scumbags. It's never too late. I don't care how many years you've been dead. You're a scumbag, you're a scumbag. But let's walk over here to the supposed ringleader of these scumbags, and that is, of course, John Heath. Now, John Heath was a part of this robbery, and he wanted to turn state's evidence, so he was a snitch. So they made a deal with him that if he cooperated and testified against these other guys, that they would just give him life in prison. So they gave him a deal. He got life, but you know what? The people of Bisbee said, no way, Jose, or no way, John, no way, Juan. They broke into the county jail, grabbed him, and of course, as it says right there, they hung him up high. They hung him up high, and he got what he deserved at the end of the day. This is Mrs. R.L. Brown, died 1882, was the proprietor of a hotel here in town, and she died of natural causes. This is Freddy Fuss, died 1882. It is not known what age he was, but he drank some stagnant water. It could have been poisoned water from the mine, and he died as the result. If you look over here, this guy, John Martin, he was a miner, and he was working on the Howochuka water line. A tested pipe was unplugged, and a blast of water hurled a jack against his chest. This here is Judge Lindley. In his younger years, it says he was one of the ablest members of the bar in California. However, I guess he overworked himself, and his health suffered, and he died 1882. J.D. Mcdermott, he fell from his horse, I guess his horse got spooked or something, and he fractured his spinal column. I find it quite interesting that they know that he fractured his spinal column. Maybe they did an autopsy, who knows. And over here, it just says Teamster, killed by Apaches. And Ernest Brodines, he was murdered. He was a miner, a native of Germany, and he was found with 4 bullet wounds. It was suspected that his partner that he arrived into town with killed him. Why was he suspected? Well, because when he was discovered dead, his partner had disappeared. This here is Hilly Hickson. He was a schoolboy age kid out here and fooling around on some stilts that he was walking on, and he fell and hit his back. Now, it seemed that he was only slightly injured, but the next day he woke up with back spasms and died. And I'm sure if many of you have been on Google looking up odd gravestones, you'll remember this one. Just like that, huh? Oh, wow. That ain't no good. One of the very few graves out here that is a real cemetery marker. It looks like it's made out of some kind of a stone. Mr. Peel, born May 31st, 1854, died March 25th, 1882. This grave right here simply says, Red River Tom, shot by Ormsby. This one here says, Darren, shot by Slaughter. W.M. Grounds, 1882, died of wounds. What kind of wounds were they? Nobody knows. Very hard to keep those kind of records. Of course, we have here another famous grave. Quite clever with the words, I do say so myself. William DeLogg, killed playing cards, 1883. This is Three-Fingered Jack Dunlap. I'll let you guys out there guess why they call him Three Fingers. Go ahead, I'll wait. While I'm waiting, he was shot by Jeff Milton. So Jack and his friends were train robbers, and they attempted to rob the train that was being guarded by Jeff Milton. Well, Jeff Milton was having none of that. He quickly put that to end. Shot Jack Dunlap. He didn't die right away. He was taken to Tombstone to recover from his wounds and to face trial for his dastardly crime of robbing a train. However, he didn't make it. But wait a minute now. Before he died, he was able to snitch on all his friends. Yeah, good old Three-Fingered Jack right there, boy. I wouldn't be hanging out with that guy back in the days, I tell you. This was James Tully. He was killed in 1881. He was a miner employed by the Grand Central Mining Company, and it says to avoid being crushed as the cage shot upward towards the timbers overhead, Tully had to jump from 250 feet to the bottom of the mine shaft. So I guess he was damned if he did, and he was damned if he didn't. Very odd way to die. Now, I do want to say really quickly, this isn't a drama channel. I don't do drama. If you want to watch drama, there's plenty of drama YouTubers out there that you can get your full daily dose of drama. However, there is a little bit of drama involved in this grave right here. This is Colleen. He was shot by Frank Leslie in 1880. It was the result of some form or fashion of a disagreement over Colleen's wife. And after Frank Leslie shot Colleen, he married his wife. I guess a little bit of double dipping was going on over here. This is the grave of Guadalupe Robles. He had a brother, wasn't a very good person, was going around robbing places, and they were looking to hide out at Guadalupe's house. So his brother and his brother's robbing partners came to the house to hide out, and then police officers arrived, and some form or fashion, Guadalupe got the brunt of the law's form of justice, and they shot him. This here is the grave of Fu Key, first name F-O-O, last name K-E-E. I'm going to go out and guess that he was of Chinese origin. He owned a store out here, and he died of potamine poisoning. Probably not pronouncing that word correctly. Rest in peace, Mr. Key. Also, we got right here Mrs. Ah Lum, Chinaman, born in China, died in Tombstone, December 6, 1904, at the age of 67 years of age. This here is John Swain Slaughter. I wonder if he's the other Slaughter back earlier in the video. 99 years old. He died February 8th, 1945. Lucky to live that long back in those days. Got some coins, cigarette butts. Old Man Swain. Chink Smiley, 1884. He was shot. Okay, and then we got this grave right here. Simply says 2 Chinese. Now, why does it say 2 Chinese? Well, because of course, guys, there's 2 Chinese gentlemen buried in this grave. They died of leprosy, and they didn't know what their names were, so they simply put 2 Chinese. Yes, you might say a racially insensitive time in our country back in the olden days, But depending on what you think of advancement is, we've advanced as a society. Too bad we don't know these two gentlemen's names, so we can put their proper God-given names on their stone. Since I am in Tombstone, and more than likely I'm not going to come back out here for quite some time, let's go take a quick drive into town, and let's go see if we can find the location of the OK Corral. And of course there should be some area where they used to hang people for whatever crimes they committed. Everybody back in those days was getting hanged, so let's go into town really quickly. I am currently walking down Allen Street right now, and call me ignorant, I did not expect this. I actually thought Tombstone was a ghost town, but there's lots of souvenir shops. They do some form of reenactment of the OK Corral shootout. As you can see right here, you got people dressed up in costume playing certain characters. And other guy told me that this place doesn't get lively at night. Usually it's busy in the daytime. It has its busy seasons, and then of course after 5 o'clock he says it's pretty much just food and booze right here. But this does look like a really neat place to bring your family and just have a good time and check out the happenings of what this place used to be in the old days of Wild Wild West, and get yourself some souvenirs while you're here. Yeah, so they're having a small procession down the street right here. Apparently somebody in town passed away, so they're just walking together, I believe, to a funeral. Check this out right here. This is awesome. This is an old hearse from 1879. This is a horse-driven hearse. And you have right here the Undertaker's embalming kit right there. And you have a picture of the 3 individuals who were killed at the OK Corral. That's Billy Clanton and the McClurry brothers. Look at that. Look at those old tools. That is awesome. This is the oldest profession in the game. This is what a room would look like when you would come out to Tombstone and you would go to a bar and drink, and there'd be some girls there, and you pick which one you want, and you take her back to the room, and hey, whatever it is that you do between 2 consenting adults, go on and do it. You can see a city license card right there. And this is a picture of one of the ladies of the night right there. Pretty attractive, and a svelte figure to say the least right there. Don't worry, guys, the parts have been blurred out. So you had some more pictures of the ladies back in the days. Got some very curvy figures right here. And of course, right here, rounding this, this is the actual site of where the shooting between the Earp brothers and the McClurleys happened at the OK Corral. And as you can see, those mannequins, that's about where they were standing at when they pulled out their guns and started shooting. Amazing. This is an old outhouse from back in the days, And basically, you were sitting on some kind of a bench with a hole in the ground, and after you were done, I'm assuming you would cover it in dirt. Can you imagine the smell back in those days? It'd be absolutely amazing. I believe this was not the place to hang out at on a hot summer's day. I can tell you that. Got some old wagons right here. Oftentimes when a wagon would become unusable, they would convert them into basically what would be known today as kind of like a pickup truck. So the driver would sit right here, and then of course you have the area to haul tools or whatever. You would put it right there. Quite amazing. And then later on, as advancement in technology, they soon made springs to make the ride a little bit more comfortable. Can you imagine the lives of the people that would ride in these wagons? I mean, I wonder who they were, what they did for a living. Quite possibly a very famous person rode in these wagons. This right here is the house where Wyatt Earp lived. Now, back in 1879, when the Earp brothers first arrived here, they tried to make their fortune mining gold and silver. And of course, the story that I told you about Virgil and Wyatt Earp, and the shooting at the OK Corral. After the shooting, the outlaws eventually got their revenge and shot and killed Virgil Earp. And eventually, the rest of the family left town. But this was where he lived, right here. This here is the old city hall that was erected in 1882. Now here's a fun fact. This place is on the National Registry of Historical Places. Now, when I seen this marshal's office sign, I thought that was for decoration. This guy comes out of a truck and he walks into the building, and I said, what did they use this building for? He said, this is the marshal's office. So there's a real U.S. Marshal. He's upstairs. That's his office. And amazing. I had no idea. I thought this building was empty. I thought it was just here for people to look at. So that's quite amazing, to say the least. So you better not come to Tombstone causing any problems, because this guy, he, from what I've heard, is not the one to mess with. Okay, so that includes my video. Kind of a different ending. I don't normally do videos where I go to places to show things, but I would have felt pretty silly if I didn't at least show you a couple of the sites that are here in Tombstone, Arizona. So anyways, I would like to thank my trusty steed. This is actually my electric scooter that I purchased a few months back. It actually came in a really good handy just scooting around this town. In case you guys are wondering, now even though tourism is a very important piece of the economy here in Tombstone, there is an army base not too far away. And when I first came over here, I thought this was going to be an absolute ghost town, but it's not. Quite amazing, to say the least. And if you're ever thinking about moving to Tombstone and buying a piece of property, I think the median price of a home here is around $90,000. So it's not terribly expensive to live here in Tombstone. So anyways, live but not live, but still alive by the grace of God. I am Lamont at Large in Tombstone, Arizona. I hope you enjoyed the video. By the way, I picked up some old arrowheads. If you don't know what an arrowhead is, it is a stone that's been sharpened to a point, and Indians used to use them on their arrows to shoot at you. And a good chance it was back in those days. If you got shot by an Indian's arrow, you probably weren't going to be around long enough to barely say your goodbyes to your wife and kids. If you want an arrowhead, hit up my Instagram, Lamont at Large. Send me a message with your address. I'll mail you an arrowhead and a cup of coffee. Hit me up, Lamont at Large, Instagram. I don't have many arrowheads, so only on my Instagram, not on my email. Let me know. Okay, now I'm live but not live, but still alive by the grace of God. I'll catch up with you on the next vlog. Peace out.